welcome everybody to the Zeta Connection. This is a chat between three contactees, Paul, Cyan and Judy Carroll. If you don't know any of us, we're going to explain a little bit about ourselves first, and then we're just going to let it flow. It's just like a fireside chat in Australia, except we're not there. And we're all going to be just chilling and relaxed about it as well. And we're planning on just having a few chats, but talking about this from our own perspectives. Each one of us has been around a long time and had a lot of contact. And we think that it's probably important to share some of that contact in a way that people can understand, just talk about it in pretty simple language, I think. So I thought that it would be best if Judy Carroll talks about herself first, so that for the people that don't know Judy, they can find a little bit about her. Then Cyan can talk about herself, and then I'll say at least 3 words, all right, for myself.
That sounds great. Yeah, well, my contact started in my very, very early childhood with a huge amount of fear. I was absolutely terrified. I wouldn't go to bed on my own. I was so scared. What I found out many, many, many years later, once I did establish contact with them at about age 30, I had actually chosen this, because the decision that I made before I came into this life was to come in with like a melded soul consciousness. So sort of half Zeta, half Earth human, so that I would be able to bridge the 2 races and understand the perspective from both. But I also knew that my work was eventually going to involve helping people through the fear, so I knew that I had to experience it firsthand. So I just basically cut off my ET consciousness right up until it started to open up at age 15. So up until then, I was terrified. I have some memories. I have a memory of being taken up our street by a very, very tall woman holding my hand. And the memory I brought back was we went to a train station to board a train, but I know now I was taken on board a ship. And I know that this was happening on a regular basis because of this ongoing fear. Once I reached 15, got out of the schooling system, and and I'd had a very, very strong urge to take up Spanish dancing, flamenco dancing. I didn't realise at the time, but my great-grandmother was a dancer in the gypsy tradition. And flamenco, of course, is a shamanic type practice. And I didn't realise at the time, but this was part of my training to be able to go into an altered state, but still keep my left brain operating, so that while I'm in trance, I can still sort of write things down or do automatic writing. So I had amazing training right from age 15 doing this, performing flamenco. At about that time, I had a very interesting experience one night in that I had the body paralysis. I became conscious in the middle of the night and couldn't move my body, and I could see the doorknob of the bedroom turning. Absolutely terrified, trying to call out to my parents. Of course, I couldn't. No sound coming out of my mouth. And the next thing, I just blanked out. But I woke up the next morning and remembered this experience. And it was really weird. Even the fact that I could see the doorknob turning, because it was a very dark room. I was in the back of the apartment we were living in. So there was no lighting or anything, and yet I could see it happening. After that, I started becoming aware of having this teacher upstairs, I call him. And he started guiding my life very, very strongly. And it was many, many years later that I realised that he was a tall Zeta elder, or grey elder, by the name of Maris. Okay, so he sort of stepped in and guided me very strongly. He was the one who actually guided me into doing Spanish dancing, which I did for many years. And then as I matured up to about age 30, I started getting a really strong urge to learn meditation. But being a dancer, I was very physically oriented and having a lot of trouble with this. And one Sunday afternoon, we were living out on an acreage property outside of Brisbane, and my husband's family were over, and I started feeling a bit off colour, like I was coming down with the flu. So I decided to go upstairs and lie down in a back bedroom and just relax. The next thing happened, the body paralysis came on again, along with a really, really bad headache. And the next moment I was in an awful state, and 3 of the Zetas were standing beside the bed. And I immediately recognised them as family. It was just, it's like I've just felt my heart chakra open up like that, and was, oh my goodness, you're the ones who've been hanging around. And it was a little bit of a joke between us. And they said, yes, it's time for you to get back to work. You've hid yourself away out here long enough. You've got to get back to work. And a long conversation followed in which they told me that I must learn to meditate. And they advised me to learn Tai Chi to assist this, being a dancer, that the moving meditation would be the way for me to go. Anyway, back then, here in Australia, 1983 that was, I didn't even know what Tai Chi was. So they explained to me it was like moving yoga. And they also said to me we would be moving from the country acreage we were on. Time for you to get back to work. You've got to get back into the city. So all this came to pass. The next 3 years, we had to move house. I ended up finding Tai Chi classes just around the corner from where we moved into the city. And a woman moved in next door into a rental house who was a meditator of 10 years, and her teacher had just come up from Tasmania. She was starting a closed meditation circle, and I was invited to join. I never meditated in my life, and I was invited to join a closed meditation circle. And it was there basically that I really came in contact with the Zeta family, and I started learning to do automatic writing, which then led to the books and a few other very close encounters and interesting contacts. So that's basically my story.
Yeah.
Do you remember what your task is on planet?
I mainly work on the ship. I don't have a lot of memory working on planets, but on the ship I do healing. And in fact, I have a very, very clear memory of being up there in my grey form and removing an implant from the head of an Earth human man.
Yeah. And
it's so crystal clear.
Yeah, and this is some of the work that we do with people is, it's not hypnotherapy, we do what's called point of origin, and we actually show people what they did or do when they're actually on planet, still do, previous to their human incarnation.
Wow.
So that's pretty interesting stuff. Okay. And what about you, Cyan?
What about me, Paul?
What about
That's very formal. I always love hearing these stories because it kind of makes me feel like, oh, thank God I'm not the only one. So there's so many things you've said there that I recognise, and although some of the things may have happened in a slightly different way, it's with the same outcome. So my earliest memories are from childhood as well, hidden behind partial screen memories. We refer to them as false memories. And those partial screen memories lifted when I was around 30, 35 as well. Back when I was very young, though, 4.5, and having my first contacts, they spared me the fear, and very much found imagery that I would be very comfortable with. And so I wouldn't have like the lady walking me down the road, I'd have like a 6-foot bunny rabbit, very placid, and as a 3-4-year-old, of course I didn't have a problem with that. I was very happy with that, and the memories would be very gentle. So I'd be playing with a small boy surrounded by these big 6-foot bunny rabbits, and they were just watching. They were just stood back and observing. And so although they were highly unusual, these events would take place in the middle of the night. Everyone was asleep. I'm up on my own for some reason. I'm fully conscious and awake. They weren't scary, and as a small child, you just don't think anything of it, And so I had a lot of that sort of contact. Too. I think at some point they realized that because we also work with people, bringing them from a place of fear through to understanding. I needed to understand that fear, and I'd been spared all of that right up until the time that I just made a conscious decision to work with them. They gave me the choice to work with them. Did I want to or not? And I agreed.
Yes.
And quite soon after, I was allowed to have the very fearful experiences, which I didn't like at all, but I absolutely recognized them from what they were, because if I hadn't have experienced those, then I would not be in a position whatsoever to be able to talk to, help people through them myself.
Yes, that's right.
I recall fully conscious sleep paralysis. You wake up, you're frozen. I was levitated up off the bed, spun around, and you don't have the words, do you, to describe how scary this stuff is? There are no words. I also had opportunity to learn how to be in that half asleep, half awake, or half conscious, half trance out, but still functioning state as well. I ended up studying a long way from where I lived, between 16 and 18. And I used to do this crazy thing where I was asleep, but I was wide awake. And so I was fully conscious, yet in a highly altered state, because I didn't want to miss my train stop, so I would be getting up at the crack of dawn and traveling for 2 hours there and 2 hours back again every day. And I was tired. Wow. But you don't want to miss your train station. So I learned quite early on, without realizing, to do the same, get myself into an altered state without even realizing what I was doing. And come 17, having grown up a complete atheist, I had an experience. It was a spirit-based experience that drove me to develop mediumship skills. So from 17 years old, I was very driven to learn how to meditate and work with spirit people. So my journey changed, I guess, 10 years into working with spirit people, when the Zeta started showing themselves over me in those trance states in the mediumship circles that I was sitting in. Yes. I was the medium. There were spirit people. The spirit people would disappear, and people would say, "Oh, but we saw an alien over you," or "We saw the being from communion over you." I had no idea what they were talking about. That's when I met Paul shortly after, trying to work out what was going on. So so many similarities with what you've described.
Real parallels.
Oh well, I'm listening to your story, and I'm sitting there going, "Oh yes, I was taking some notes." Like people probably saw I was anyway. So my 3 words.
Your 3 words.
Interestingly, for me, it started when I was in my cot. They'd come into the room, but I didn't know who they were anyway. I thought they were sort of someone to play with, really.
You wouldn't think much of that.
No, you don't think anything. And then when I was 5, I realised that I could just sit up out of my body and walk around. So for me, I was be able to astral travel really naturally, and I'd go and sort of go through walls and all the rest of it. I wasn't real sure though what was going on. I mean, at 5, do you even question anything?
No.
Until I was taken on craft, and they took back in the olden days, they used to take the skin plugs out, but they were quite big, like they weren't the small ones like they are these days. These ones are quite big. Myself and a friend of mine, we've actually got the same hole in exactly the same place on our legs. So we even measured it, and it was exactly the same distance. So it seems that there's a specific part of the leg that they would take from certain people, and that's all based around the consciousness sitting in the physical form, and how is that person's psychological state for them, because a lot of hybrids actually lose their minds. That's another issue. I was told that I'd been shot through the leg by an arrow. But the problem is that when I pulled the arrow out, the blood just came straight out in a stick. So I knew that something wasn't right with that screen memory. And I used to dream all the time of little plastic parachute men. So when I was taken from the craft back to the front yard at 2 o'clock in the morning as a 5-year-old, I'd be imagining that I was coming down as under a little parachute. Just bizarre screen memories. And this is why I think the phenomenon is so difficult to explain to people, because you're having all this information given to you in a way that you can understand it and the way that they think that you need to understand it. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Like you guys, I actually had to learn about being consciously awake but also in trance. And I just didn't realise that until I heard you two talking. I used to just sit and zone out, and it was so pleasurable just to sit in that state, and you'd be fully awake, but you'd just be in another space, and it was just, and I used to love it. I'd love it, and I'd sit there for as long as I possibly could, experiencing that. I actually had my first craft contact when I was 18. A Tic Tac or a cigar just turned up outside of the house at the window, and the side went clear. And the Zetas were there. These were two elders. And people go, how do you know the difference between an elder and a normal, Zeta or Zeta, and at work and all that? Well, years later, you actually do get to know, they come into the house.
Yeah.
If they're 2 foot tall, they're probably not going to be an elder. That's they're not Yoda or something like that. So these two beings showed themselves through the side of the craft, and my friend and I were there watching them. And then some other friends of ours turned up, and the four of us were all standing there watching these ET looking at us while we're looking at them. And the thing is that there was no internet back then, so we had no way of really knowing what we were looking at anyway. And we weren't fearful. There was no fear about it. But what was interesting was after the craft left, and it was there for about, 5 minutes, we all just turned around like automatons, walked in, sat down in the lounge room and watched TV. Never mentioned it again, as though it never happened. That was the thing. Another way of dealing with that. For me, it all came to a big head when I was about 28. I got up. I was getting ready to go to work. I didn't turn the light on, and I got dressed, and I walked out and I'll never forget this. I walked out and I reached out to touch the kitchen light switch, and I heard this rustling noise behind me. And I looked and I saw this little 2 foot or 2.5 foot ET standing in the corner, and I thought it was a demon. And this thing flew at me so fast. It was on my left arm. I had it. It was no problem. And I thought, oh my God, I'm being attacked. Something's attacking me. And then I looked, and this other one that jumped on me. I had both of them. I was fighting. I was terrified. And then next thing, a third one jumped up, grabbed me on the head, looked me straight in the eyes, and I went down like a ton of bricks. Terrified I was. And, I'd had all this contact with them as a child, but as an adult, I'd forgotten about that contact.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, all these screen memories started dropping away. I started getting all these symbols coming at me, hundreds of symbols. And it was just, I thought, oh, man, I'm losing my mind here. This is all a bit crazy.
Yeah.
Of course, when I woke up, I was in bed, and I thought I just had a dream. But I realised that I was dressed and my shirt was on backwards. So because I don't know how to,
They don't do that.
Yeah, they don't do that. I sort of thought about 40 that it might be helpful because I'd always meditated. I thought it might be helpful to actually really learn how to meditate properly. So I spent a lot of time doing that. And somebody messaged me one day from one of the meditation groups and said, the best way to learn about meditation is to find the stillness in meditation. And so I spent a lot of time doing that. And I started to notice that I was able to contact these beings that seem to come in and out of the house, because there's always this distance between us and them. There'll be something, though, that will take place, like when you went upstairs, you felt unwell, and next thing they started talking to you. And at that point, I think that they realise there's some level of commitment that we've got towards making contact in some way.
Yeah.
And then they sort of started teaching me about trance states, breathing. And what I did was, the more I worked with it, the more I realised that I was able to bring them through. And like Cyan, they'd come over like being from communion over my face, but we actually videoed it, or myself in this group that I had. And these beings, these Zetas, would just be talking through me about all this stuff. And as you know, like some of us, we all wrote books about it and all the rest of it. We then, I thought to myself, I'm going to put this to the test because we're about evidence, as you are as well. And I thought, it's all right to have all these beings talking all the time, but I'm going to get them to actually do something in the three-dimensional space. I wanted them to bring a craft. So at Wallachia in New South Wales, I said to them 2 weeks previously, I want you guys to bring a craft. And there was a big discussion between myself and them. They said that they would do it. I got 20 people together and we all sat around and waited. And about 8:15 at night, the craft landed. And the Zetas came out and they walked around everybody. So that was pretty interesting as well. And I know that everyone's going, oh, I want that experience. I want that experience every day.
Yeah, we don't get it.
So, and so we've actually just started a small CE5 group in the UK. Not that we're doing any CE5 stuff. We're going to be trying to call in the craft doing our method, which is basically it's called a vectoring method in regards to that. And of course, that relationship with the Zetas that we've got helps with people getting healed as well. So we've had a lot of people that have been healed. So that's basically, in a nutshell, all of us have given our stories, and of course we've just sort of moved straight over the top, and it doesn't really mean much at all. So is that in your book? I was reading that you had a fully conscious daytime encounter. Is that one the one you were doing? That's the one. Yeah.
Age 30.
30. Did you then take that contact that you had and then try and work with that contact, to learn from it? Did you do anything with it?
Oh yes. Well, I didn't even realise at the time the full, meaning behind it. It just answered my questions, who had been hanging around me for so long. I'd actually had a contact with my teacher, Maris, my 12th grade teacher, the week before, during a dream encounter. We were standing on the banks of a stream and having a very, very long, very deep discussion. And what I realised afterwards was he was asking permission or asking me if I was ready to have more of my ET consciousness opened up. Because I noticed, Diane, you said they asked you, do you want to do this work? And I'm sure they have with you too, Paul. There's always a point where they ask you permission, do you want to continue with this? And it was during this encounter that I did. And I woke the next morning feeling really sad and depressed because, leaving him behind. It was such a beautiful experience, feeling this depth of love between me and this being. And it was a week later where they actually came in, and what they were doing, they were sort of opening. I could feel my crown chakra being open and more of my ET consciousness sort of coming into the body. But it still took me a few years to meld all this and realise, because it's just so different, as you both were saying. It's like there's two brains in your body, and one is aware and one isn't, and they sort of fight each other.
Do you know,
in a way.
I want to talk about that a little bit because when so obviously depending on how you work with a race will depend on the information that they give you. That's the first thing. And so the Zetas have been very forthcoming with a lot of scientific information through myself, and I'm not a scientist in any way or anything like that. That's why they've used William, because they knew that I wouldn't understand it. But I remember sitting one day in my lounge room, and these two beings turned up, these watery-like looking beings, but they do that mind-to-mind telepathic communication. And one of them said, we need to move your etheric boundaries. Now, of course, you've just said chakras, but they say etheric boundaries. And I said, well, what are etheric boundaries? They said, well, all people, any living form has an etheric body. And sometimes people call them astral bodies, sometimes whatever, but what they are basically is a mirror image of your physical form. But the difference is with the etheric boundaries is that every part of your etheric body has a specific boundary, right? And around your head are within your brain are your temporal lobes, and those lobes have energetic boundaries on them, and that's what holds them apart. although they're physically held apart, but they're also energetically held apart. They said, listen, what we want to do with you is on this side, we want to change the boundaries so the spirit people can come through and give information and talk and do all the things that they do so that you can continue on as a medium. But on this side, what we want to do is we want to expand that boundary so that we can come through and we can talk as well. So that, like you said, you've got two brains. And I didn't think much of it. I did sort of question. I said, well, is this safe? As you do. And they're like, oh, yeah, sure. It's always safe. And,
don't worry about it.
And they said, so we'll start now. And I went, okay. And next thing, my heart just was pounding, bang, really fast. And then it started to skip beats. And I thought, oh, I remember you have to cough. I don't know why I thought that. I've heard this is a thing about people having heart issues. If you cough, it helps. So
it brings
cough really
everything
hard. Pushed it all back to normal, and they said, that wasn't too bad, was it? I said, stop right there. I said, that's enough. And they go, well, it doesn't matter. It's all done. Your etheric boundaries have been shifted. I said, you didn't tell me my heart was going to play up. They said, well, what did you think was going to take place when we moved the etheric boundaries of the Temple Road? I said, how do I know? I'm not a scientist, right? I noticed after that, though, they were able to come quite clearly and they could then present themselves. That's why I asked about what you did on planet previous to being a human, because then what happens is a lot of people start moving into that role that they play, that function that they perform on planet. They start doing on physically on this planet as well. So,
Yeah.
Have you had your etheric boundaries moved at all? Or?
Twice.
That
I'm aware of. Yeah, and it does take a while to settle down afterwards.
Yeah.
There are definitely physical effects to it and potentially psychological effects to having it moved as well.
Well, that's right. And psychological effects are big. I mean, I think a lot of people suffer from depression.
Yeah. I had a similar experience. I think how mine took place was I was over in the UK in 1995, went to visit a circle over there, the Rollright Stones on the Warwickshire-Oxfordshire border. And while I was there, the caretaker of the circle invited me to stand in the centre of it to feel the energy, which was lovely. And it just happened to be at 12 noon on the day of the summer solstice. Anyway, I got back to Australia and I was feeling really sort of woozy, and I thought, oh, it's just jet lag, but it lasted for a couple of weeks, and I was also finding I was getting into much deeper states when I was meditating and doing Tai Chi. And one night, 3 weeks after we got back, I was taken out of body, back over to the circle, and held down by a group of small greys, and a needle about that long with this massive, beautiful blue faceted crystal on the end was put into my third eye chakra point. And oh boy, it hurt. I was struggling and pull it out. Anyway, they did. But I think that was what my real awakening. It was after that when I started writing my books.
That's so interesting you say that. I was doing some work as a medium in Sydney, and the Zetas were coming through talking to large groups of people, about 30, 35 people, and I had to be doing this level of contact with them for 10 days straight. So every day they were going to come through and talk, and I said, I don't think I can actually do 10 days of communication with you. And on the first day, it was about 4 o'clock in the morning. I woke up and there's this Zeta standing beside me. And next thing I know, I looked up and I had 2 more Zetas standing over the top of me. And I said to them, don't put me to sleep. That was the first thing. Straight away, I said, don't put me to sleep. I didn't want to play that game. I don't want to be put to sleep.
Yeah.
They showed me this long silver thing, and on the end was like claws, spider's legs. And it was holding this red orby thing that was inside this silver structure. And they said, we're putting that up there. I said, oh, okay. So up she went, and that was fine. And I noticed someone actually came up to me the next day and was talking to me, and they walked away. And they just kept looking at me, and I thought, wow, well, that's rude. Why they walk away? And then somebody else walked up to me and looked at me and walked away again. And I said, what's going on? This is a bit strange. It turned out that my eyes were completely black because of this device, right? And I've actually spoken to people that were there that time, and they were saying that that's what was happening. Anyway, 10 days later, wake up, they're over the top of me again. And I say, don't put me to sleep again. And they don't. And next time they go, well, we're going to take it out. They said, you're going to know that this is coming out. So up she goes, up to wherever it was up here somewhere. And they pulled this thing out, and it cut all the way down as they took it out. And it bled for 3 days.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah. My goodness.
And they said, it's your own fault, because if you had been asleep, you would have just felt some residual damage. But because you were awake, your physical body was reacting to the removal of the device.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Because I did wake up with a little scar, because, that was what made me realise it wasn't a dream, it was real. There was a little red point there, and I had a scar for quite a while. So it sounded like a similar thing.
Yeah. Hey, have you had any, like, I'll give you an example. So Cyan and I, we work with a lot of different races, right? So we've worked with the Council of Nine beings, the Pleiadians, the Anunnaki. We've had all these beings come through and talk, evidence themselves in really interesting ways. But the Zetas, we found out over the years that there's about 63 races of Greys or Zetas, right?
Yeah.
And we said to the Zetas, we only ever seem to be working with one race. So they said, well, we actually, there's a lot of different races that are part of the collective consciousness of the race. We'll introduce you to some of them, right? You remember that? Yeah. And so we then were sitting in the house, and these beings started turning up as orbs. You should talk about the orbs. That was really interesting.
Yeah, we like orbs. We were just sat, and it was nighttime, so the lights were low in the house. But it's hot where we live, and so the back door was open, with the screen door, and through the screen door I saw this basketball-sized black orb just shoot sideways upwards into the air, from about a meter off the ground up. I was like, there's an orb, really big orb, really big, solid black orb. No, this isn't a translucent, bubble you get from the soap stuff. This is like a big, solid black orb. That was the first night. And the second night, there was just a small tennis ball-sized orb that shot past the window. Same door again, shot past the door. And on the third night, a tiny little ping-pong ball-sized little orb flipped up. Exactly the same place again. And then I looked at it, and then the next second, I saw this Zeta face just look, classic, like you see them look round the door. Like looked into the lounge area. I said, I was up off my chair at that point. They're in the garden. They're in the garden. Well, we, as you do, calm, settle back down again, we went off to sleep, didn't we? But we didn't sleep. We were wide awake. The energy was high as in the house.
Yeah.
And that night they came in, at least 3 of them came into the house, into our room, and carried out a number of different procedures. But it was not the race we normally work with, still Zeta, but one of the 63.
Yeah.
And so it was like they'd been using these orbs to kind of monitor us, to observe us for a few nights.
Yeah.
And then on the third night, they obviously decided we weren't going to come at them with shotguns or, try and take photographs of them. We were quite happy that they were around. It was literally amazing.
And so that race is called
they prefer to be referred to as the organics.
Oh, sorry. So they call themselves the organics,
as opposed to
so the Zeta organics. Then we came across another Zeta race, and their whole race, and I'm not sure how many there are of them, but their whole form is based around ethics. And so everything for them is an ethical consideration. So what we started to realise is, and I think we came across another one as well.
Oh, we've come across
race.
numerous.
But what we started to realise was, just as this planet has different countries, the Zetas have different races, physically all over the place, but they perform a function.
Very specific.
They're very specific function that the race will perform for the rest of the planet. And that's how they're all in service to others. So have you come across anything like that at all? Or is Maris the only contact, or?
I've mainly just worked with Maris. I have worked with the small ones at times. But I get what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about.
Those small ones make me laugh. I walked out one morning at 3:00, and one of them had its back. It was standing in the lounge room, had its back to me, and I thought, I don't know why. Actually, I just thought, their technology's not working. So I walked around, and I crouched right down and looked into its face and said, "I can see you," and it just disappeared. I felt so sorry for it. They must be so terrified, really.
Yeah.
I think they do worry.
They worry.
They do worry. Yeah. But they told us they have to undergo training to come into this Earth environment. That they don't, they're very specific beings that have to undergo training to cope with being around humans.
Yes, I can totally understand that. I can totally understand that.
Well, all of us have had to go through training on planet before we incarnated.
That's true.
As humans, and I'm talking about every person that's watching this that's a hybrid. You've gone, and I will sometimes say you, meaning them, have gone through specific training, but the issue is, of course, what happens once you move into your human body. One, you forget who you are, and that's because of the Schumann frequency. Two, the screen memory technologies by the Zetas and other races is based on the Schumann frequency, and that's why when people come from spirit realm, that the people also forget who they are. Those spirit people forget who they are as humans because the Schumann frequency actually grounds people out and shoves up that thick veil between everybody.
Yes. And I mean, we can only access 10% of our potential conscious awareness down here. This is also what we were given a teaching back in 2001 by the Zetas on the human ladder, which it's like a cycle of consciousness evolution through the universe. And planet Earth is basically on level 1, which means we can access about 10% of our potential conscious awareness. Right. They're from much higher up. And
which book's that in?
It's in the Zeta message, and also I got more teaching on it for my extraterrestrial presence on Earth lessons in history book. More information came through, so it's in that one as well.
Okay.
Yeah. And they actually gave us a crop circle, which is what we use for the cover for the Zeta message. That crop circle illustrates the human ladder.
Oh, I'll have to look at that again now.
Because when we were writing the Zeta message, we wanted to write about the human ladder, and we were trying to draw it to illustrate it. And of course, it's so multidimensional, it was almost impossible. And we jokingly asked them, how about giving us a crop circle? And lo and behold, they did.
Oh, wow! And how did you find it? How did you find the circle? Was it in the backyard?
It was quite amazing. We were writing the book in about 2001, 2002. And in 2010, when it was in the process of being published, a gentleman by the name of Brett Parrott, an Australian crop circle researcher, was over in the UK when this circle was actually created, Milk Hill. In Wiltshire. And in 2010, he just out of the blue contacted me via our website to just talk because, he could see we were interested in all this stuff and he wanted to talk to someone. And I was telling him about how we'd asked for this circle. And he said, my God, he said, I think it's the one that I got a photo of. And he sent it through to me, and it was the same one. And he'd actually asked for it as well. Oh. So it was like we were asking here and he was asking over there. And he'd taken a brilliant photo of it from a helicopter, and he kindly allowed us to use it as the cover of the book.
Wow.
Zeta said to you, this is what they said, you as humans are perceived as extraterrestrial to other races, seen as hostile and aggressive planet, one to be feared and shunned. And I thought, yeah, that's really interesting to make that point, that that's how they see planet Earth.
Yeah.
You know, down here it's all those evil greys, you know, and all this, but, you know, they don't realise that they're scared of us down here.
Well, look at what's going on with Skinwalker and all these sorts of places. People are going, oh, you know, why are these beings doing this to the animals? Why are these beings doing this? Well, just look at
human behaviour.
What humans do. I mean,
Yes.
It's beyond me.
Imagine flying by at the moment, you know, like the state of Russia and the Ukraine, and there's military aircraft being flown around the world and strategically positioned. You wouldn't be stopping for a tourist trip,
like,
would you?
You'd be
put your foot down on the accelerator and speeding by. Yeah, they do. I mean, and that they also, as well as all of that we mentioned earlier, that they have to undergo training to be here.
I was just going to say that, Brian. Yeah, they have to.
Just being around a human, if a human looks at a Zeta, it makes a connection, and they get affected by all the human emotion and all the baggage that we carry around with us, whether we realise it or not.
Oh, look, that night that I was up on the ship and I had to remove an implant from a man's head, what happened, he was in the clinic lying on the bed, and I just put my head around the corner and he turned around and saw me, and the look of horror on his face, I'll never forget it. And it was like, I sort of felt, oh, you know, come on, don't be scared, please. And I was trying to speak to him telepathically, and there was no way he could not hear me.
No.
And I just kept saying, don't be scared, don't be scared, don't be scared. You know, I'm not going to hurt you. You know, but no, couldn't get through. Never forget that.
So we've seen a lot of implants, and I know that, like, there's an esoteric, you know, sort of people go, oh, you know, we're just going to remove implants, or we use some crystals, we're going to do this, that. And what we've seen is that what they're doing is they're actually only looking at what's on the surface. They're not actually seeing what the underlying implant is, and that's the problem. And generally it's when the person's in a trance state with a Zeta or a gatekeeper spirit that they're actually able to see the real implant. Some of these implants are based on technology, but this is becoming much more pervasive. I'm not sure if you've had any dealings with people in regards to low-level entities and attachments and.
Yes, I have. When I was doing my meditation training, I actually had a problem with one, and my tall grey teacher stepped in and got rid of it.
It happens. I mean, it does happen, and I've seen the Zeta's removed an implant from someone's spine, and this thing had some sort of biological tumbler device on it, and you couldn't. The only way for it to be removed was like a Rubik's cube, was to change and shift everything around, and when it was in the right zone, this thing could then be released from the
Okay. Yeah, the one that I remember removing this implant from this man's head, I had to go right down inside his head, you know, with the long fingers, and I could remember having to manipulate something inside or disconnect something, and then we were able to pull it out. And I was with two other Zetas up on the ship, and I can remember a conversation between us. That's good to get that out. He should be safe now.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you've just said there. With having to do the extraction via it's like some sort of a tumbler device, but it's not really that. It's not really that, but you've got to. That has to be lined up before the implants removed. We're seeing it now. I know this is probably going to be a little bit unpopular, but we're seeing a lot of people that are working with a race. I believe they call themselves the Orions. Their people are accepting these implants into their heart space
under the guise of a crystalline device or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of trickery going on. A lot of trickery going on.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that the people, they don't know. They think that they're doing the right thing. That's always what it comes down to. But it should be, I'm not sure what your opinion is, but we think that people should never accept any technology from a being ever, unless the being specifically indicates what the technology is for, that you actually know the being as well.
Yeah, you've spent time to build relationship.
Yeah.
So you trust them
Yes.
implicitly.
Yes. You've got to be familiar with him. And it's funny, people can't. What I cannot get my head around is the difficulty Earth humans have in how can I say, feeling into the energy of a being. Whether it's an ET being or whether it's another person down here, they don't seem to be able to read the energy, and this even applies with many psychics.
Yeah,
they don't read the deeper energy.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of us all start off doing Reiki, get to level 3, and then we don't know much back then anyway. And then you start working with extraterrestrials, and you start working in their space, and you learn about the technologies. And then you start to realize that you need to always be reading the fabric of the energy, even around yourself, every day in the room.
Yes.
And the more you get to know about yourself as a person, the more aware you are about what's going on around you. As you are breathing and reading the energy through, because you've learned about meditation and all those things, you can start to understand that when people come into your space, that they're shifting the fabric around you as well. And once and then everything's, of course, consciousness, and you can start to see where these influences can come in. Nobody's better than anybody else. And the thing is that we all have the potential to get stuck. People talk about reptilians and the Brotherhood and the collectors and all these races. One of them, I think they're called the controllers, the archons, all these things. I mean, as long as we realise that these races are out there, and we're just there for the taking as far as they're concerned. That's all it comes down to.
We try to impress a common sense approach, don't we, for people that we work with and teach? It doesn't matter what being you're working from or from where, just try and use common sense. If it
That's right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And learn to sense into energy and feel energy.
We'll just before we finish, we'll go through what books we've all got. Judy, do you want to talk about what the names of your books are so people can look them up?
Our first one is the Zeta Message, Connecting All Beings in Oneness. And then we have a docudrama book based on that called Human by Day, Zeta by Night, which is written, it's marketed as fiction, but it's based very, very firmly on fact, and it's based on the Zeta Message book. And it's probably a good one for people to start with who aren't familiar with this sort of subject, because it gives the Zeta reality, but from a perspective that I think people can understand more easily. Our third book is Extraterrestrial Presence on Earth, Lessons in History. And then I've just had a couple more books released. I can never remember the names of them because they've just been released on Amazon as ebooks. The first one is called An Interview with an Alien, Comments by an Undercover ET. And it's a commentary on Laura Spencer's book, Alien Interview. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No.
It's very widely read, and it's an interesting book about the Roswell crash and a supposed survivor who was interviewed by a military nurse. And some of it is very, very good, and some's obvious disinformation. So I've written a commentary on that. And the other book I've just had released is Cosmic Spirituality, Blending Religion and Science in Oneness. From off-planet perspective.
So that's great. You sound like a good body of work there.
Maybe we can.
And we've got a website called the Zeta Connection, and we've given away multiple books. So we've got the Primer of the Zeta Race is a free ebook. The Zeta Interviews is a free ebook, which is the Zetas talking to humans.
Just like raw transcripts.
That's about raw, about 700 pages of that. The one that's just come out is called Extraterrestrial Cosmology and Technology, and that is based around a lot of the things that the Zetas have said in regards to quantum mechanics, physics, all these sorts of things I don't know anything about. All right.
Wow, very interesting.
Yeah. I then have also written the book, so Alien Interaction Trilogy, the book, The Zeta Mind, and that book's all in regards to contact. So if people want to learn how to contact ET safely, that's a good guide for that. It's only about 100 pages. And then what I started doing was writing smaller study guides, say 50 pages books.
So 3 of those.
One's on astral traveling for beginners. One's about the chakra work and practical mindfulness and energy and meditation. And that just teaches people the basics of how to meditate with some practical exercises as well. And so we'll put all that stuff on the bottom. Interestingly, we're actually writing a book at the moment that is our experiences from the inside, learning about how to be actually human. That's very interesting.
Wow. Wow.
And that's pretty interesting because you have to sort of do a big mind switch about how all that works. But,
wow. Gee, I'm going to have to go and get hold of some of those books. They sound brilliant.
Helpful, hopefully.
Helpful. I know some of them, I've had to read them so many times, and I end up using, like a lot of people's books, them as resources. So you download the PDF or the ebook, and then you can just, search through them, looking for keywords to find out, what do the Zetas say about this, or what do the Zetas say about that. So that's how a lot of people use them, for sure.
Right, yeah, very good.
All right, well, this is the end of our first fireside chat, but we don't have a fire because it's too warm.
Yep.
And probably in a couple of weeks we may do another one.
That sounds lovely. Yeah, lovely. Lovely to talk to you, Paul, and lovely to meet you, Diane. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And I'll